Hello YouTube, and today in this video we are going to look at how we can get a recording set up at home for under £500, roughly $700. It's going to be a tight squeeze, but I think we can get there. Now, before we begin, I want to talk about a few notes before we start the video. Number one, I'm going to presume that you already have your own computer to actually record into. This can be a Mac or a PC or whatever. It doesn't have to be some incredible machine. It just has to be something that's working and with free hard drive space. I'm still using a MacBook from 2011, I believe, and it's still working right up to date with all the latest software and hardware. So there really is no excuse. If you need to, go and look at the second-hand market. I really recommend it, especially if you're buying Macs. In this video, we're going to talk about the bare essentials for actually getting on and recording your own music. So we're going to be talking about the software you need and the hardware you need. What we're not going to discuss are further subjects like soundproofing or where you're doing your recording. I just want this video to be a kind of rough outlay of the couple of bits and pieces I would look at getting. In this video, I'm also going to talk about how you can avoid spending too much money on gear you don't really need. So where we're going to spend the most money are going to be in the areas that I feel you get the most bang for your buck. Another point is that we're not going to be using iPads, tablets or mobile phones in this video. I think that's a separate subject. They have their own software and hardware. I also want a setup so that if you guys are getting really into this, you can upgrade to more professional equipment if you want to do so. So without further ado, let's head over to the computer and see what stuff I found for you guys. You're gonna need a DAW to record all this music into, and there are a couple of options, but we are going for the cheapest first. So the cheapest first is free, and that is Pro Tools First. Let's go over what the actual features are of Pro Tools First. It's gonna give you 16 tracks, so that's 16 individual inputs that you can record your music to, which is fantastic and incredibly generous. This is just like having an 8-track or 16-track recorder, so this is going to be more than enough to record your ideas. You get 16 MIDI tracks and instrument tracks. They are a bit different, but basically MIDI instruments, aux tracks and buses, so you get 24 buses. So this is where you can send your music and group it down, or it's for things like reverbs, delays, etc. 3 gig of included sounds and 23 plugins, whatever they are. Importantly, you can actually record up to 96k at 32-bit. So unfortunately, I am going to have to compliment Pro Tools on the fact that they are giving away a completely free, in effect, 16-track digital recorder. So as this is the cheapest studio build of all time, apparently, we're going to go for this free option first. Another option for a cheap DAW that you can try is Reaper. Now, I've used this a couple of times and I've always had great results. It's got such a passionate fan base and the people behind it that make it, and it's a real team effort with Reaper because it's also open source. The fantastic thing about Reaper is it gives you 60 days free trial, full functionality. So unlike Pro Tools First, where they give you a reduced amount of usage and functionality forever, Reaper's going to give you 60 days of everything. However, when you get to the end of that, it's only $60 to actually get the individual license, which is by far the cheapest option for a piece of software that's going to allow you to do everything from small recordings to full mixes and basically beyond, because it's always evolving. So I really try and push Reaper. I know quite a few people that use this and they love it, and it also works great on PC or Mac. So overall, it's a really good alternative. So you get 60 days free and then it's only $60. So that would make it probably number 2 on my list for the cheapest studio build. So I now want to talk about the DAW I actually use, which is Studio One. I've just seen here on Splice that they're offering a rent-to-own option at $16.99 a month, which works out about kind of 12 quid here in the UK. There are 24-month payments of this, but what I like about Splice and this rent-to-own idea is that you only really you rent it when you're using it. So if you rent it for a month, you use it for 30 days, you make some music, you print some stuff off, and then if you don't use it for another month, you can just pause the subscription. I have other pieces of software through this method, and I really enjoy that. It's a fantastic way of working depending on your situation. So if you just want to try it out for $16 a month, it's a kind of a no-brainer. But you also get 14 days free, so you can get the full functionality for 2 weeks without paying anything, and then it's just $16. So really what you get for $16 is you actually get just about a month and a half of usage for Studio One. Studio One for me is the one to choose. It's like if Pro Tools worked and had all the things that you actually wanted in a lightweight program. So if you are a Pro Tools user, coincidentally, make the move. I wish I did it 10 years ago, but I didn't. It's an amazing piece of software, and I can't recommend this one enough. This one does have a slightly higher price entry though, but it is the one I've ended up using. So for the £500 I ended up paying on my first installment with Pro Tools, this is absolutely nothing. So definitely check this one out. So the very first thing you need is an interface. Let's look on eBay and see how cheap we can get one. Now immediately we've got this Behringer interface here for £40. We're looking for the input, so we know we've got an XLR, we've got a jack input here, which is fantastic. 2 analog outputs, so you can get your headphones in there and some monitors, USB, yes. Okay, so a couple of the technical things you need to make sure, doesn't matter which one you get, but make sure you look for this. We've got phantom power. That's because some things that you actually you're going to be plugging in need a power source coming from the interface. So some microphones need phantom power, and that's a plus 48V. That's what you'll see when you're searching for stuff down there. The next thing is actually the sample rate, and we need to find out, okay, so we can get 48K. Now, most music is recorded at 48K. Most studios I've gone to, they just go to 48K. You go 96 or higher. My interface does that, but I never use it, it's not really used, and some top producers still actually record at 44.1, and if that all sounds like jargon, don't worry. A 48K resolution, that's how many samples of the audio the interface is actually taking, so it's how detailed the sound is. You don't really need more than 48K, and I would say if you're doing classical music or really detailed music like that, maybe a higher sampling rate is great, but for most kind of modern music made on computers, 48K is fine. So this would be a really good option, especially considering it's only £40. It's not even that, $39.95, and free postage. Oh look, this one's a 30. Okay, so we got some, they could be refurbished. So we've gone down, we've gone to £30 already. Okay, we've got one for £10, so you could maybe get something secondhand, real cheap here. There's a Roland one here for £30, as long as it's got the same details, and that has 2 XLR inputs, so you can have a left and a right, which is cool. So you can plug 2 microphones in, or 2 input sources, so like a left and right from a keyboard or something like that. Not necessarily if you're just playing guitar and then you're singing or capturing one microphone, you can just do with the one. Okay, so you can see here we can get a little bit of leeway, but let's say that's kind of like 30 to 40 quid for an interface. Here's another key decision: whether you're going to choose headphones to monitor or buy yourself a cheap pair of monitors. We're going to have to look for something that's going to be under the £100, $120 region. If there's one area that you need to make sure you have something vaguely decent, it's going to have to be your monitoring. Your Apple AirBuds and your free headphones unfortunately just won't hack it. I recently, and I do spend a lot of money on headphones and monitors, because for me that plus the microphone is really the things you can't get away with. Your input source and then what you're hearing. The Sony MDR series have been great for me. The pair I recently bought, got a pair here actually of the ones on screen, are the MDR 756, and here they're listed for £90. So this is what I'm now using in my studio over these, which are considerably more expensive. But I would say that these sound like the ones I'm currently wearing, just with less drivers in them, so they don't have as full a sound. But this is going to be perfect for your tracking, so you're going to get a much better spectrum with a pair of headphones like this. The other company I would recommend that are amazing, but they can be quite pricey, are German Maestros. They're incredible for the money. They're just amazing. I have a pair of their mastering headphones and they are incredible. But you're going to have to make a decision. Are we going to go good headphones or good monitoring? Because although you need both, we're trying to do the cheapest build possible. But this, you Don't go any cheaper than this. Okay, so for monitors, like the video for headphones, we're going to have to make a decision about whether we're going to go for monitors or headphones. If you've got the money, get both. But if you want to use monitors over headphones, which I guess most of you will want to, you're going to have to go for something like these KRKs. There aren't a lot of options that I've heard personally in the market for like under £400 to £500 because they are expensive. So if you want to go really cheap on a budget, I would actually not get monitors. Here's the reason why. With headphones, you can record your vocals, your guitars, your acoustic piano, anything you're miking up, and monitor at the same time without getting the bleed from the speakers coming back. The problem is if you don't have the money for speakers and a monitor, it means just with monitors you're not going to be able to record without that spill. It's just going to always be there. But if you want the monitors and you can afford them, these little KRK, the Rockets they call them, any of these in these series are fantastic, and you can probably get them. There's actually one here, there's a pair here, just tiny ones for £125, or there's ones on some stands here for £300 down here, so you might be able to nab some kind of just before we get to 300 mark. But this is where the cost of this studio build is going to get really eaten up if you're not careful, because you're going to get your other bits and pieces quite cheap, go to look at monitors, and then you're suddenly paying £400 or £500 or kind of $600 to $700, unfortunately, to get yourself just some monitors. I would recommend look out for a second-hand pair of KRK Rocket series monitors, or ditch the monitors completely and just spend a bit more money on the headphones. So the next step is going to be getting yourself some cheap cables. So let's see how cheap we can go, but we've got to talk about what cables you need. You're going to need two types of cables. So the first cable is going to be an XLR cable. Now this is your kind of to and from cable, so not everything is going to be a guitar cable as you know it, or what really is called a 1/4 inch jack. That's just the measurement of the pin at the end. An XLR cable is going to be for other instruments, microphones. So once you've got yourself some jack cables and some XLR cables, you should pretty much be able to plug into everything. There are RCA cables, all kinds of other bits and pieces, you know, phono plugs that you can see here for hi-fi, which you might need depending on the speakers you're plugging into. Just have a look. Here's my opinion on really cheap cables. Cables are copper wrapped in rubber. There is no magic behind cables, and the only thing that really makes a difference is the quality of the build at the end of the cable, where you've actually got the sockets. A more expensive cable is going to last you a long time because it's been properly put together and it's just a high manufacturing quality and the parts are just better in general. However, you're not going to plug in a 500 quid cable and really hear the difference between that and a cheap cable, because it's copper, it's a resistance. So if you want to look at it from a physics perspective, there's really, every time that a signal goes from A to B, you're losing signal, okay? So it's just how much least resistance you can get from one end to the other. So it kind of makes more sense to have actually shorter cables than it does longer cables, or more expensive cables, because you're just physically taking up less space for the sound to degrade. It's an ongoing beaten to death subject. Just put it into YouTube and see the nonsense. It's insane. But I do advise obviously getting a high quality, but we're on the quest to have the cheapest cable possible. A balanced XLR cable, £5. It's the length that you need to think about. How long do I actually need it? If I need a 3 meter cable, it's going to be £6 each. So if you've got two of those cables, that's going to be £12. Okay? So that's going to be like $18, $20 or something. Just get something really cheap, okay? Sometimes even when I'm replacing stuff, I don't go really expensive anymore. I used to. Most of it is a marketing con. But I would say, remember, the end connectors can be a bit dodge. So I would suggest, yeah, here's a listing. That's what we need. If we're going to go for jack cables, so we're going to go for 1/4 inch jack cable. Okay, so £6 here. This would be absolutely fine. Again, you just want to watch. Okay, so if you go like a 4 meter one, £10. It's going to be fine. It's the connectors you want to look for. Does the connector look like it's going to break the moment you stand on it? Because guitar cables are going to get abused. So I would actually suggest in your studio setup to spend a bit more money on a guitar cable or an instrument cable, because that's the one that's going to get bent the most, whereas cables going to and from your interface or your computer might not ever really move. So that's my big tip for guitar cables. Look, it's £10. That's all it is, £10. Okay, and also with guitar cables, think about how long you need it. always think about how long you need your cables, because you don't need to overspend and buy a 20-meter cable for 15 quid, because you just never ever use it unless you're performing. Okay, so the one thing I definitely wouldn't skimp on, and I would set aside the most money for, is getting yourself a decent microphone. Now, if there is one microphone to rule them all, it's definitely the Shure SM57. They are going to cost you around about £100, which is probably about $120, but it's a big but. You could, in theory, and I've known people to do it, record entire albums just using this thing. It's a legendary microphone for a reason, and really, the way I sum it up is that an SM58 that you also see is the kind of main vocal microphone. Really, it doesn't capture instrument recording nowhere near as well as the SM57 counterpart. So if you're going to spend money on one microphone, it's going to have to be this. There's one here for £151 here, which is also got the right angle mod. This is really good if you're recording mainly guitars or acoustics or something like that, and you can actually just have that dangling down on the cabinet. So think about what you're actually recording, but an SM57 is still the way to go. Okay, so now we're on to MIDI interfaces. For this video, I'm just going to presume that you probably already have an instrument, but you might not have a MIDI controller, seeing as we're trying to do the cheapest studio build ever. Now, a MIDI interface is very important to understand what you're actually going to use it for, because they range from being huge controllers with thousands of buttons to quite literally, if you can see here, this USB controller here, which is 2 faders. So think about what you're going to use it for. I'm going to presume we're going to try and make music with it, so we're going to go for the smallest and cheapest keyboard we can find on here. I'd recommend trying to get hold of one of these. These things are amazing. I love these little Ackeyes. You can see here that the keyboard is 1.5 octaves. So that's all you're gonna need for programming melodies, chords, and bass lines, okay? It does get frustrating if you are a pianist and you're thinking, right, I haven't got any more octaves. But if we're going for the cheapest build, you're just gonna have to play twice as much. So this is where, depending on how much you've got to play with, this could be an option where you can spend more money so you can get more octaves of play. For example, if we were to go, let's go, okay, down here, you could find a, look, open, never used keyboard. So you've got all the octaves that you need to perform like that, and they may even chuck in a USB cable or something, so that's 20 quid. So the point is that have a good hunt around for MIDI controllers and know the purpose of what you're using them for. Please avoid stuff like this. This stuff looks appealing, but are you really going to be, you know, the next MPC king or queen? I don't know, but if you are, you're probably going to need one, but if you're not, don't get these. They're just controllers. There's nothing that this does that you can't do with a mouse and keyboard, which you probably already have. So what you can't do is perform music, which is you're going to need a keyboard for. Although depending on your genre, you might want the pads, but you need to make that decision. That one's only 14 quid and it's got one bid, but you probably get it for 30 quid. So if you wanted to, you could split it. You could get a keyboard and a little controller if you're really into sample editing, beats and stuff like that. But I would also argue that you can make beats like I've done for years, just using a keyboard and mouse. You don't have to just input it. And you could also input it just on a keyboard. So to be honest, these are kind of more auxiliary purchases that don't really matter. So that's MIDI controllers. So the next subject to tackle is, where do you get your sounds from? Well, we're in 2021 and a lot of music is being made purely using samples and then recording on top of them. So we've got to find somewhere where we can get samples to facilitate any kind of genre that we want. Because we're on a budget, we need something with a lot of flexibility. And for me, it's always going to be Splice. I've been using this for a few years and I just continue to be impressed by them and their service. They've been fantastic. It's $10 a month and you get a credit system which allows you to buy sounds and also, if you like, presets for plugins that you've got. Where this is a big advantage is that, say you have a huge library, which this happened to me, of snare drums, and you don't really need any more, I can use the money I'm investing to get presets instead. Or I can just pause the subscription, so I don't get penalised if I don't really have much use for it in 1 month. So for me, they've really thought about the flexibility for the customer, which is fantastic. And the amount of stuff you can get on Splice is just never, ever ending. And that, for me, really puts it at the top of the list. I get an infinite amount of sounds, an infinite amount of presets for a low price of $9.99 a month. There are also other options, which I think, you know, you get so much for it. For $20 a month, you get way more credits, you get plugins, and it just goes on and on and on. So I really would spend your money with these guys. They're fantastic. The other big sell for me was the Splice app. Now what this is a librarian that allows you to drag and drop samples straight into your DAW. So instead of having to faff around in the Finder window and bring up samples and things you've downloaded from the net, it's all organised within one package. And where this is, the real power behind this is the search function. So if I search for kick drums, for example, so if I put kick in, it will automatically see all the kicks on my computer. And then at the end of the pile, when I get there, where it says more on Splice, it then gives me other options online to then buy with my credits and then download and then stick in my DAW. And it's all done within one piece of software, so that's amazing. The other thing as well I use all the time is over here we've got the genre box here. So once I click on Tech House, all the things for Tech House on the keyword searching squishes it down, so I get kicks that are relevant to the music I'm making. You also have keys, so if you're looking for samples to put in a sampler, like bass, you know, bass lines or keyboard riffs, it's all in there. BPM ranges for loops, because you can filter through loops, or one shots, which is just the single sample. It's a really good app, and you just get that free when you start paying for it. So Splice has got to be at the top of the list for samples. So where are we with the costs for this build? Well, I'm happy to say I think we can actually get this under £500 or $700. There's a bit of leeway because some pieces of equipment that I've mentioned are cheaper or more expensive depending on where you shop, and don't rule out the second-hand market. You will catch yourself a bargain if you stick at it. So for the DAW, you could get Pro Tools First, which is free. So that's definitely going to be the cheapest thing on our list. The next thing is an interface. Now, down here I've got written £40 for an interface. You probably won't be able to get cheaper, but that's £40. So for your headphones / monitoring, I've got written down here £100. Now, the reason for this is because I don't want to go any cheaper for monitoring. I would get rid of the monitors completely and just go for headphones. Get those Sonys for around about £100, probably a little bit less. For the cables, who knows? I've put a budget down of £20 here. Again, you might be able to find some stuff secondhand, people may be giving stuff away, etc. Remember, it's copper and rubber, so check the connections and you should be fine. A MIDI controller, well, I've put £50 down. I think you could maybe get some bargain stuff for around £20, £30. We saw some stuff on eBay on that video, so who knows, but I would say £50. And last but not least, the microphone. So the microphone, again, I wouldn't skimp. I would get the SM57. That's roughly about £100, $120. It does kind of fluctuate. I've seen a couple for about 85 quid here or there, but set yourself aside £100 for that. So all in all, I think you could get this home set up for around about £300, maybe a bit more. I would still have a budget for £500. I know it's still a lot of money, but if you can actually afford it and spend a little bit more, you could throw in a pair of monitors as well. But I think this build comes in for around about £300 and something, roughly $500. So I think we've hit the goal, which is fantastic. So that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you guys have learned something, and hopefully I'm going to save you a bunch of money in the process. So thank you for watching, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.